aren't the whole gambit, but three primary reasons. The first is that boycott, divestment, and sanctions shatters a narrative of parity between two peoples struggling over one land. This is not about two peoples in one land. This is about a state funded and supported with unequivocal financial, military, and diplomatic support from global superpowers, and a people struggling to remain on their land. There is no parity involved in this. This is not a narrative of providing security for land. This is a narrative of an indigenous population fighting off foreign colonialism and apartheid and fighting off ethnic cleansing. There is no parity in that type of paradigm, and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement shatters any kind of preconceived notion that it could be. The second is that this movement, built on three prongs of human rights norms and international law for equality, for the end of colonization, and for the right of return, has an inclusionary vision. It's a vision where everybody gets to be equally human, where unlike limited resources like oil or power or money, human rights are not limited resources. Human rights are not privileges. Equality is not scarce or mutually exclusive, and BDS does that. And thirdly, what the BDS movement does is deprives Israel of the legitimacy that it so desperately wants. It doesn't want legitimacy by becoming a nation amongst nations. It wants legitimacy as an apartheid, settler, colonial state, and wants everyone to agree that it is okay in this exceptional circumstance. There are no circumstances where that type of exclusionary and structural violence is permissible. And what this movement does is denies Israel of that legitimacy, which otherwise provides it cover to continue its policies, because even when military violence stops, even when it stops for a second, that structural violence continues. There is no moment when Palestinians are not ethnically cleansed. Not right now. There is no moment when military violence stops that structural violence does not continue unabated. And yet those that laughed at us, even those that believed in this message, did exactly the opposite. They offered Israel legitimacy. They reinforced an exclusionary vision. They reinforced a vision of two peoples fighting for the same thing as equals. But I'll tell you what, if you're part of this movement, you get a shout out from the AIPAC president as being the third most significant threat to Israel's apartheid and settler colonialism. But if you decide to join that other movement and provide legitimacy and cover and this notion of parity, then you can get a photo op with the Israeli ambassador Michael Oren on the day of our Nakba. Why are these achievements of BDS so critical? Because this Nakba continues. Consider that in the middle of April this year, a family of 11, the Netshe family, was evicted from their homes. And it was evicted asserting that this Jerusalemite family didn't have deeds to prove that they have lived there in that home for generations. So in the middle of April of this year, Israeli soldiers arrested all of the males in the family and held back the women, including the pregnant mother, as they watched soldiers and settlers unpack everything from their home to throw it out onto the street to make room for new settlers to live. This is the beacon of democracy. This is also 2012 and not 1948. When we discuss refugees, when we discuss the right of return, we are not correcting a historical wrong that nobody acknowledges. We are correcting an ongoing project to reduce the number of Palestinians in historic Palestine. We are rejecting an ongoing ethnic cleansing process. Benny Morris, when he wrote what Israel's biggest mistake was, he acknowledges that Palestine belonged to Palestinians. He acknowledges that there's an indigenous population that was driven out. And he laments that Israel didn't kill enough of us. That Israel didn't displace and forcefully transfer enough of us. And this is liberal Zionism lamenting current conditions